The clinking of champagne glasses was the only sound louder than the frantic beating of Emma Vance's heart. She stood in a room dripping with old money and new ambition, a ghost at the engagement party of the man who had promised her forever just 6 months ago. Her ex-husband, Justin Croft, held court, his arm draped around his new fiancée, a woman who looked like she was sculpted from diamonds and disdain. Then he saw Emma. A cruel smile played on his lips as he raised his glass, silencing the room. What he said next was meant to destroy her, to erase her completely. But he had no idea that a single untraceable phone call was about to make him the biggest fool in the city and turn the woman he called nothing into one of the most powerful people he would ever know. The ballroom of the Atherton Hotel was a galaxy of glittering chandeliers and even more glittering people. Emma felt like a speck of dust caught in a sunbeam, visible only to be judged. She didn't know why she'd come. Maybe it was a morbid need for closure, a foolish desire to show Justin that she was fine, even though every part of her felt like it had been shattered and poorly glued back together. Her simple navy dress, once her favorite, felt like a thrift store hand-me-down next to the couture gowns that floated through the room. Justin Croft, her ex-husband, was in his element. As a rising star at the private equity firm Sterling & Locke, he moved with the predatory grace of a shark who knew he owned the ocean. His fiancée, Tiffany Sterling, the daughter of the firm's founding partner, of course, was his perfect accessory, blonde, beautiful, and breathtakingly wealthy. Emma tried to stay near the back, nursing a glass of sparkling water, but a former friend of the couple, a socialite named Beatrice, spotted her. "Emma, my God, I didn't expect to see you here. How brave." The word brave was coded in so much pity it felt like an insult. The conversation drew Justin's attention. He glided over Tiffany attached to his arm. "Ellie," he said, his voice smooth and cold. "Surprised you came. I thought you'd be at home. What is it you do now, doodling in that little sketchbook of yours?" The small crowd around them chuckled. Emma's freelance illustration work had always been a point of contention. He'd called it a childish hobby. "I wanted to wish you well, Justin," she said, her voice tighter than she wanted. Tiffany looked her up and down, a dismissive flick of her eyes. "That's sweet." She cooed, the sound as artificial as the giant diamond on her finger. Justin's smile widened. This was what he wanted an audience. He raised his champagne flute, tapping it with a manicured nail. The chatter in the room quieted as people turned to face him. "Friends, family," he began, his voice resonating with false sincerity. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate my and Tiffany's future. It's a future built on strength, ambition, and a shared vision." He paused, his eyes finding Emma in the crowd, and he pinned her with his gaze. "You know, people say you learn from your past, and I certainly have. My first marriage," he let out a short, derisive laugh, "was a lesson in charity, a starter marriage, if you will." A wave of snickers rippled through the guests. Emma felt her blood run cold. This wasn't just an insult, it was a public execution. "I tried," Justin continued, performing for the room. "I really did. I tried to build her up, to give her some ambition, some drive. But you can't make something out of nothing." He shrugged, a gesture of faux helplessness. "She was a nice girl, but ultimately she was just a placeholder. She was nothing special, had nothing to offer. She was and is nothing." The word hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Nothing. He had summarized her love, her support, her sacrifices, the years she'd put her own dreams on hold to prop up his, into that single brutal word. The faces around her were a blur of pity and scorn. She saw Beatrice smirk. She saw Tiffany preen. She felt 100 pairs of eyes branding her with Justin's verdict. Her own were burning with tears she refused to let fall. She placed her glass down with a hand that trembled almost uncontrollably, turned without a word, and walked away. The sound of Justin's triumphant laughter followed her all the way to the gilded doors of the ballroom. She stumbled out into the cool night air of downtown Boston, the city lights blurring into a painful watercolor. She leaned against the cold stone of the hotel, gasping for air, feeling the full weight of the humiliation crush her. He hadn't just broken her heart. He had tried to obliterate her very identity. Her phone buzzed in her clutch. She ignored it. It buzzed again, and again. Annoyed, thinking it was her best friend Chloe checking in, she finally pulled it out. The caller ID was an unknown number with a New York area code. Against her better judgment, she answered, her voice a raw whisper. "Hello? Am I speaking with Ms. Emma Vance, formerly Emma Croft?" The voice was male deep and impeccably formal. It was calm and steady, a stark contrast to the storm inside her. "Yes. Who is this?" "My name is Alistair Finch. I am a senior partner at the law firm of Finch, Covington & Steele in New York. I am calling on behalf of the estate of my late client, Mr. Arthur Pendleton." Emma frowned, the name barely registering. Pendleton. She vaguely remembered a great-uncle on her mother's side, a reclusive old man she'd met only once as a small child. He'd sent her a $20 bill for her birthday every year until she was 10, and then nothing. He was a phantom from her family's past. I think he was my great-uncle," she stammered. "Is everything all right?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. "I'm afraid Mr. Pendleton passed away peacefully 2 days ago, Miss Vance. I am the executor of his will." "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that," she said, though the man was a stranger to her. "Thank you," Mr. Finch replied, his tone professional yet not unkind. "The reason for my call is to inform you that Mr. Pendleton has named you in his final testament. It is a matter of some urgency. Could you be at my office in Manhattan tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. for the reading? Manhattan tomorrow." Her mind was still reeling from Justin's verbal assault. I don't know. What is this about Ms. Vance?" the lawyer said, his voice dropping slightly, imbued with a gravity that cut through her shock. "I cannot discuss the details over the phone, but I can tell you this: it is imperative that you are here. What Mr. Pendleton has left for you will change your circumstances profoundly." Her circumstances. The cramped one-bedroom apartment she could barely afford. The mountain of debt from her divorce. The feeling of being utterly, hopelessly nothing. Something in Mr. Finch's tone, a hint of unspoken significance, made her straighten up. "Okay," she heard herself say, a flicker of defiance igniting within her. "I'll be there." As she hung up, she looked back at the Grand Hotel entrance, where the muffled sounds of music and laughter still spilled out. Justin was in there, basking in his victory, certain he had left her broken and worthless. A placeholder. Nothing. For the first time all night, a genuine, albeit watery smile touched Emma's lips. She had no idea what awaited her in New York, but it had to be better than what she was leaving behind. The first-class train ticket to New York, emailed to her by Mr. Finch's assistant within minutes of their call, felt like a relic from another life. Emma hadn't traveled in anything but coach for years. As the train sped south, Boston's skyline giving way to the Connecticut coastline, she felt a surreal sense of disconnect. Less than 12 hours ago, she had been publicly flayed, reduced to a footnote in her own life story. Now she was being summoned to a prestigious Manhattan law firm by a man she barely remembered. The offices of Finch, Covington & Steele occupied the top 3 floors of a skyscraper overlooking Central Park. The lobby was a cathedral of marble and polished brass. A silent elevator whisked her to the 80th floor, opening into a reception area that whispered rather than shouted wealth. The air smelled of old leather, lemon polish, and power. A severe-looking woman with a chic gray bob led her down a long hallway lined with dark, imposing portraits of men who all looked like they'd been born in a 3-piece suit. She was shown into a corner office where floor-to-ceiling windows offered a godlike view of the city sprawling below. Alistair Finch rose from behind a mahogany desk the size of a small car. He was older than his voice suggested, perhaps in his late 60s, with a mane of silver hair, kind eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles, and an impeccably tailored suit. He looked less like a lawyer and more like a wise university professor. "Ms. Vance, thank you for coming on such short notice," he said, shaking her hand. His grip was firm and reassuring. "Please sit. Can I offer you some coffee? Water?" "Water would be lovely, thank you." She managed, sinking into a leather chair that felt softer than her own bed. He poured her a glass from a crystal carafe, his movements deliberate and calm. He sat opposite her, a thick leather-bound document on the desk between them. "I was very sorry to hear about your great-uncle," Emma said, feeling it was the right thing to say. Mr. Finch nodded slowly. Arthur was a unique man. Very private. He valued loyalty and authenticity above all else. He disliked pretense. The lawyer's eyes seemed to study her for a moment as if gauging her character. "He spoke of you, you know. Not often, but with a certain fondness." "He did?" Emma was shocked. "I only met him once at a family reunion when I was 5. I barely remember him." "He remembered you," Mr. Finch stated simply. "He followed your life from a distance, more than you know." He gestured to the document. "This is his last will and testament. It is straightforward, and he was in his right mind when he signed it. There are a few minor bequests to his household staff and a donation to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, but the remainder, the entirety of his estate, his assets, his properties, and his controlling interest in his company, he has left to you." Emma stared at him, trying to process the words. "The remainder I don't understand. What company?" Mr. Finch leaned forward slightly. "Ms. Vance, your great-uncle was Arthur Pendleton, the founder and sole shareholder of Pendleton Global Enterprises." The name meant nothing to her. "Pendleton Global? It is a privately held conglomerate," the lawyer explained patiently, "with major holdings in technology, sustainable energy, real estate, and international shipping. It's one of the largest private corporations in the world." Emma felt a wave of dizziness. This had to be a mistake, a cruel joke. "There must be other family, cousins, nieces. He can't have left it all to me." "He has 2 surviving nephews, Marcus and Jonathan Pendleton," Mr. Finch confirmed. "He has left them each $1 to be used for the purchase of a bus ticket back to whichever rock they crawled out from under." His words, not mine. A ghost of a smile touched the lawyer's lips. He felt they embodied the very greed and artifice he despised. He was looking for someone else. Someone he felt was genuine. Emma's mind was a whirlwind. This wasn't real. "What does this estate consist of? A house, some savings?" Mr. Finch opened the folio. He cleared his throat and began to read in a calm, even tone. "To my great-niece Emma Vance, I bequeath the following: the penthouse apartment at 740 Park Avenue, New York, the waterfront estate in Southampton, New York, the chalet in Aspen, Colorado, the villa on Lake Como, Italy, and the private island in the Grenadines known as Pendleton's Rest." Emma's mouth went dry. Each location was more unbelievable than the last. But the lawyer wasn't finished. "Furthermore, I bequeath to her the entirety of the Pendleton art collection with an estimated value of $900 million. Emma made a small choking sound. $900 million. "And finally," Mr. Finch said, looking up from the page to meet her eyes directly, "I bequeath to Emma Vance my full and complete ownership of Pendleton Global Enterprises, along with all associated liquid assets, stocks, bonds, and investment portfolios." He closed the document softly. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the distant hum of the city far below. "Mr. Finch," Emma whispered, her voice trembling, "what is the total value of this inheritance?" Alistair Finch took a slow breath as if to prepare her. "Ms. Vance, a full valuation is ongoing, but based on the last quarterly report, the conservative net worth of the assets you have just inherited is approximately $27 billion. $27 billion. The number was so vast, so astronomical, it had no meaning. It was an abstraction. Emma felt the room tilt, the view of Central Park swimming before her eyes. She gripped the arms of the chair, anchoring herself. Nothing. Justin had called her nothing. A hysterical laugh bubbled in her chest, and she had to physically bite her lip to keep it from escaping. Mr. Finch seemed to sense her shock. "Breathe, Miss Vance. Just breathe." She took a shaky breath, then another. "Why?" She finally asked, the word barely audible. "Why me? He didn't know me." "That's where you're mistaken," the lawyer said gently. He reached into a drawer and pulled out a slim modern tablet, sliding it across the desk to her. On the screen was a web page. It was her own personal art blog, the one she poured her heart into, filled with her delicate, whimsical illustrations of city life and quiet moments. It had a few hundred followers, mostly other aspiring artists and friends. Arthur was an intensely private man, but he was very much a man of the modern world, Mr. Finch explained. He found your blog years ago quite by accident. He never commented, never reached out. He just watched. He admired your talent, but more than that, he admired your persistence. He saw you creating beauty for its own sake, with no expectation of fame or fortune. He saw you working part-time jobs at coffee shops to support your art. He saw the world ignore you, and he saw you continue to draw anyway. He pointed to a specific post from 2 years ago. It was a simple ink drawing of a bird trying to build a nest on a windswept branch with a caption she'd written. "Some days you just have to build even if the wind is against you." "He showed me this one," Mr. Finch said softly. "He told me, 'That girl has steel in her spine, Alistair. She just doesn't know it yet.'" He believed that someone who could create value from nothing was the only person he could trust with everything he had built. The tears she had held back at the party finally came, but they weren't tears of humiliation. They were tears of disbelief, of grief for a man she'd never known, and of a staggering, terrifying vindication. An eccentric, reclusive billionaire had seen more worth in her quiet doodles than her own husband had seen in their entire marriage. Mr. Finch pushed a series of documents across the desk toward her, along with an elegant fountain pen. "These are the preliminary papers. They acknowledge your acceptance of the inheritance and grant me temporary power of attorney to manage the immediate transition. It's the first step. The rest of your life, Ms. Vance, begins the moment you sign." Her hand was shaking so badly she could barely hold the pen. She looked down at the signature line. Emma Vance, not Emma Croft, the name of a woman standing on her own. She thought of Justin's smug, cruel face. She heard his voice echo in her mind. She was nothing. With a newfound resolve that felt like it was forged in the very core of her being, she pressed the nib to the paper. The ink flowed black and final. As she signed her name, she wasn't just accepting a fortune. She was reclaiming her story. Minutes after being told she was nothing, Emma Vance became one of the richest women in the world. Leaving the law office was like stepping out of a dream and into a world that was suddenly rendered in high definition. Mr. Finch had arranged for a black car, a discreet but luxurious sedan, to be at her disposal. The driver, a polite man named Thomas, addressed her as Ms. Vance, with a deference that was both unsettling and oddly affirming. She didn't go back to her cramped Boston apartment. There was nothing for her there. Instead, on Mr. Finch's advice, she was driven to the Park Avenue penthouse. The doorman, a stoic figure named George who had worked in the building for 40 years, greeted her with a respectful nod. "Welcome home, Ms. Vance. Mr. Pendleton always said you'd be along one day." The private elevator opened directly into the apartment, and Emma gasped. It wasn't a home. It was a kingdom in the sky. A 2-story living room with windows that framed Central Park like a living masterpiece. The space was filled not with opulent clutter, but with exquisite art, comfortable-looking furniture, and thousands of books. It felt like the home of a mind, not just a wallet. A small, handwritten note from Arthur was on a table by the door. "Make it your own. Emma, don't let my ghosts get in the way." For the next 48 hours, she existed in a state of suspended disbelief. Mr. Finch's team handled everything with quiet efficiency. A woman named Sophia, a chic and capable personal assistant, appeared and helped her procure a new wardrobe, explaining that Ms. Vance would need to be prepared for board meetings and public appearances. Her old life was being packed up and put into storage by a white-gloved moving company. Her finances were being rerouted, her name affixed to accounts with numbers that looked like telephone numbers. The news, of course, broke. Not with a bang, but with a quiet seismic tremor in the financial world. "Pendleton's Mystery Heiress," read a headline in the Wall Street Journal. The story was sparse on details only that the reclusive billionaire's vast fortune had passed to a previously unknown great-niece. Her name was not yet public, but the sharks were circling, smelling blood and money in the water. And then inevitably came the call. She was overlooking the park, sipping coffee that tasted impossibly rich, when her phone buzzed with Justin's number. She had forgotten to block it. She stared at it, her heart giving a reflexive, painful squeeze before steeling itself. She answered. "Ellie! Ellie, thank God!" Justin's voice was a frantic, syrupy mess. "I've been trying to reach you. I was so worried. You just disappeared from the party." "I'm fine, Justin," she said, her own voice calm and even a stranger to her own ears. "Fine, baby. What I said. I was an idiot. I was trying to show off for Tiffany's father. It was just talk, just stupid, arrogant posturing. You know how I get. It didn't mean anything." It meant everything, she thought, just not in the way you intended. "Is that all?" she asked coolly. No, of course not," he sputtered. "Ellie, listen. There are these crazy rumors going around. Some garbage about you inheriting money from some long-lost relative. It's a scam, right? Some kind of cruel joke. You have to be careful. People will try to take advantage of you." The condescension was still there, woven into his fake concern. He simply could not compute a reality in which she was not the helpless, pathetic creature he had tried to make her. "It's not a scam, Justin," she said, taking a slow sip of her coffee. There was a dead silence on the line. She could almost hear the gears grinding in his head, the disbelief warring with his innate opportunism. "Wait," he whispered. "You're serious? So you got, what, a house, a few $100,000. "Something like that," she said, the understatement a weapon of its own. "Oh, baby, that's incredible." His voice shifted instantly, becoming thick with possessive glee. "We have to be smart about this. You can't handle that kind of money on your own. You need me. I can invest it, triple it. We can fix things. Tiffany, that was a mistake. A business arrangement. You and me, Ellie, we're endgame. We always were." The sheer naked audacity of it was breathtaking. He thought he could slither back into her life and take control of her fortune, just as he had tried to take control of her soul. "Justin," she said, her voice dropping, losing all its warmth. "There is no we. There is no us. You made your choice. You chose a future built on strength and ambition, remember? But Ellie, with this money—" "My money," she corrected him sharply. The words felt good, powerful. "And I have all the expert advice I need. Thank you for your concern." "Don't do this, Emma," he snarled, the mask slipping. "Don't you dare hang up on me. After everything I did for you, I made you who you are." A real, genuine laugh escaped her lips this time. It was liberating. "No, Justin, you have no idea who I am, and you never will." She ended the call and finally blessedly blocked his number. The sense of release was intoxicating. That afternoon she met with Alistair Finch again. He walked her through the basics of the Pendleton Global empire, a dizzying array of companies and assets. One file in particular caught her eye. It was a real estate development project in Boston, a luxury high-rise condominium. The developer was Sterling and Locke, Justin's firm. And the location? She felt a jolt of recognition. They were planning to tear down a block of old brick buildings in the North End. One of those buildings housed a small, struggling, independent bookstore and cafe called the Book Nook, a place where Emma had spent countless hours, where she'd even worked part-time for a year after college. It was her sanctuary. "This property," she said, pointing to the file. "Pendleton Global owns the land, correct?" "Yes," Mr. Finch confirmed. We've been leasing it to the current tenants for decades. Sterling and Locke have made a very aggressive offer to buy the entire block. The final papers are due to be signed next week." A slow smile spread across Emma's face. It was the first truly predatory smile she had ever worn, and it felt like slipping into a perfectly tailored coat. "I want you to do two things, Alistair," she said, her voice imbued with a newfound authority. "First, draft a letter to Sterling and Locke effective immediately terminating the sale negotiations. Inform them that Pendleton Global has decided to pursue other options for the property." Mr. Finch raised an eyebrow, a hint of approval in his eyes. "And the second thing, I want you to draw up new 30-year leases for all the current tenants of that block at $1 per year." She paused, savoring the thought. "And please make sure the termination letter is hand-delivered to Justin Croft." Justin would be in the meeting when that letter arrived. He would have been bragging to his boss, his future father-in-law, about securing the deal that would cement his career. And then a messenger would walk in and hand him a letter from Pendleton Global's new owner, and he would watch his future crumble to dust before his very eyes. All because of the woman he had called nothing. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about protecting something she loved. It was about using her newfound power to preserve beauty, not just create profit. It was the first decision she had made as the head of the empire. It would not be the last. The news of the canceled Boston development deal sent shockwaves through the city's financial circles. It was a public, brutal slap in the face to Sterling and Locke, and by extension to Justin Croft. Whispers began to circulate. The mystery Pendleton heiress was not some naive girl who could be easily manipulated. She had teeth. Justin's subsequent voicemails left from burner phones and blocked numbers that somehow got through were a pathetic symphony of rage threats and desperate pleading. Emma listened to them once clinically, then deleted them. He was a ghost, a nuisance, nothing more. Her real problem, Alistair Finch warned her, was not behind her but ahead. "The Pendleton family is not going to take this lying down, Emma," he said during one of their daily briefing sessions in the penthouse's library. "Marcus and Jonathan Pendleton are your great-uncle's nephews. They are unpleasant men. They've spent their entire lives waiting for Arthur to die so they could liquidate his assets and live like kings." As if on cue, the official challenge arrived. A thick packet of legal documents delivered by a stern-faced courier. Marcus Pendleton, the elder and more aggressive of the two brothers, was formally contesting Arthur's will. The petition was a masterclass in character assassination. It painted Emma as a gold-digging opportunist who had somehow duped a senile old man. It questioned Arthur's mental competency in his final years. It claimed Emma was utterly unqualified to run a multinational corporation and that her leadership would bankrupt the company, destroying Arthur's legacy. Their demand was simple. They wanted the will invalidated and the entire estate handed over to them, the rightful heirs. Their first move was to try and freeze the assets, a legal maneuver that would paralyze Emma's control. Finch's legal team swatted it down contemptuously in court, but it was clear this was just the opening salvo. A week later, Emma came face to face with her new nemesis. She had agreed against Alistair's initial advice to attend a charity gala for the New York Public Library, an institution Arthur had quietly supported for years. She wanted to step out of the shadows to put a face to the name that everyone was whispering about. She wore a simple but elegant black gown, her only jewelry a pair of diamond earrings from Arthur's collection that Sophia, her assistant, had insisted on. As she entered the grand book-lined hall, a hush fell over the room. People stared openly, their curiosity a palpable force. A man detached himself from a small group and strode towards her. He was in his late 50s, with a florid face, a weak chin, and the arrogant posture of a man who had never been told no in his life. He was flanked by a younger, paler version of himself, Marcus and Jonathan Pendleton. "Well, well, well!" Marcus boomed, his voice oozing condescension. "The little artist. I must say I'm surprised to see you out. I'd have thought you'd be hiding under a rock counting your stolen gold." Emma met his gaze without flinching. "Mr. Pendleton, I'm sorry you'll have to forgive me. My great-uncle described you so vividly in his letters, I almost feel as if I know you already." Marcus's face tightened. "Don't you dare speak his name. You manipulated a sick, lonely old man. This entire charade is a fraud, and my lawyers will prove it. You won't see a dime of his money." "It's already my money," Emma replied calmly, her voice carrying in the quiet hall. "And I assure you Arthur was anything but sick or lonely. His mind was sharper at 90 than yours appears to be at 50. Jonathan, who had been silent, piped up with a sneer. "What would a part-time coffee slinger know about running a business? Pendleton Global will be a smoking crater in 6 months. "That's where you're mistaken," Emma said, turning her cool gaze on him. "I don't need to know how to run a shipping conglomerate or an energy company. I know how to hire the people who do. It's called delegation. A concept, I'm told, that is foreign to those who have never had a real job in their lives." The jab hit its mark. It was common knowledge that the Pendleton brothers had lived their entire adult lives off generous trust funds, set up by their grandfather, funds Arthur had pointedly cut off 5 years prior. Marcus's face turned a dangerous shade of purple. He took a step closer, his voice a low growl. "You listen to me, you little nobody. You are out of your league. We will drag your name through the mud. We will expose every pathetic detail of your sad little life. By the time we're done, the world will see you exactly as my uncle should have a worthless, grasping leech. We'll offer you a settlement. Take it and disappear. $10 million. It's more than you've ever dreamed of." Emma looked at him, at his desperate, angry eyes, and she felt a wave of clarity. He was just like Justin, a bully who used money and status as a substitute for character. They couldn't stand the idea of a woman they deemed inferior holding power over them. She gave him a small, pitying smile. $10 million. "That's a very generous offer, Marcus, but I'm afraid it wouldn't even cover the inheritance tax on the Aspen house. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a library to support. It was so illuminating to finally meet you." She turned her back on him and walked away, leaving him sputtering in her wake. The encounter had been witnessed by dozens of New York's most influential people. They had seen Marcus Pendleton, the supposed heir, try to bully a lone woman, and they had seen her refuse to back down. They had seen steel. But as she mingled, forcing herself to smile and make small talk, a seed of doubt began to sprout. Marcus's threat echoed in her mind. "We will expose every pathetic detail of your sad little life." Her life was small. Her past was filled with insecurities, with moments of weakness, with the humiliation of her marriage to Justin. What if they could twist that? What if they could find a way to use Justin against her? The vultures were circling, and she knew this was more than a fight for money. It was a fight for her own narrative, for the right to be the person Arthur believed she could be. And she was starting to suspect that to truly win she had to understand why. Why had a man she barely knew placed the entire weight of his world on her shoulders? The answer, she felt, was not in a legal document, but somewhere inside the life he had lived. She had to find it. The legal battle with the Pendleton brothers escalated into a brutal war of attrition. Their strategy was clear: bury Emma and her legal team in an avalanche of motions, depositions, and invasive requests for personal information. They subpoenaed her financial records, her college transcripts, even her private journals from her teenage years. They were fishing, desperately searching for anything that could be used to paint her as unstable, incompetent, or immoral. Their biggest weapon, as she had feared, was Justin. They put him on their witness list. Justin, eager for revenge and perhaps promised a cut of the fortune, readily agreed to testify that Emma was emotionally volatile, prone to flights of fancy, and completely incapable of understanding complex financial matters. He twisted their private moments into evidence of her instability, her artistic temperament reframed as a sign of mental weakness. The press, fed a steady stream of leaks from Marcus's camp, began running salacious articles with headlines like "The Billionaire Doodler" and "Pendleton Heiress's Ex-Husband Fears for Family Empire." Emma felt the pressure mounting. She was holding her own in board meetings, relying on the brilliant division heads Arthur had put in place, and her own surprisingly sharp intuition. She was learning fast, but the public and personal assault was draining. She felt like the world was seeing her through Justin and Marcus's lens, a lucky fool and imposter in a dead man's suit. She needed to understand Arthur. She needed to connect with the man whose faith in her was the only shield she had against the onslaught. One rainy Saturday, unable to bear the confines of the penthouse, she asked Thomas to drive her to the Southampton estate. She'd only seen pictures of the sprawling gray-shingled mansion by the sea. It was beautiful but felt cavernous and empty. The household staff, a kindly couple who had worked for Arthur for 30 years, showed her around. Mr. Pendleton spent most of his time in his study, the housekeeper, Mrs. Gable, told her. But his heart was in the old boathouse. Curious, Emma walked down a stone path, the sea mist clinging to her coat. The boathouse was a separate structure perched at the edge of the property overlooking the churning Atlantic. It looked weathered, almost neglected from the outside. But the lock was a modern heavy-duty one. Using a key from a ring Arthur had left specifically for her, she opened the door. The air inside was cool and smelled faintly of turpentine and linseed oil. It wasn't a boathouse at all. It was an artist's studio. A massive floor-to-ceiling window faced the ocean, flooding the room with gray light. Canvases of all sizes were stacked against the walls. Some were covered in cloths, others were turned around. Easels stood like silent sentinels. Jars crammed with brushes and palette knives cluttered wooden tables stained with a rainbow of dried paints. Emma walked through the room as if in a trance. She turned one of the canvases around. It was a breathtaking, impressionistic seascape full of violent energy and dark, brooding colors. It was magnificent. She turned another, a stark, emotional portrait of a young woman with haunted eyes. Another, a vibrant, abstract piece that seemed to shimmer with contained energy. They were all unsigned, and they were all brilliant. On a large drafting table in the corner, beneath a dust cover, she found a series of leather-bound journals. The first entry was dated 1952. She opened it. The handwriting was the same elegant script as the note he'd left her in the penthouse. It was his diary. She sat down on a wooden stool and began to read. For hours she lost herself in Arthur Pendleton's world. He wrote of his lonely childhood, of being the sensitive, artistic son of a ruthless industrialist who saw art as a frivolous waste of time. He wrote of his secret passion for painting, of sneaking out to take classes under an assumed name. Father says a man builds things with steel and concrete, not with horsehair and pigment, he wrote in 1955. He will never understand that a painting can be stronger than a skyscraper. He wrote of being forced into the family business after his older brother died in the Korean War. He wrote of his arranged loveless marriage to a woman from a similarly powerful family. And he wrote of the day he packed away his brushes for good. Today I have become a ghost. An entry from 1960 read, I will run the company. I will make the fortune my father demands. I will build the empire. But Arthur, the man who feels, the man who sees the color in the shadows, is gone. I have locked him in the boathouse. I pray one day someone comes along with the key. Emma felt a profound, aching sadness for him. He had lived the life he was expected to live, sacrificing his soul for his duty. He had built Pendleton Global into a titan, but it had cost him his own happiness. She kept reading, skipping forward through the decades. The entries became less frequent, more business-focused. Then about 5 years ago, the tone changed. I found a blog today, an entry read. A young artist. An illustrator. Her name is Emma Vance. There is a lightness in her work, a quiet resilience that I recognize. It is the thing my father tried to beat out of me. She draws a bird on a windy branch and gives it hope. She sees the world not just as it is, but as it could be. Emma's hands trembled. He had been watching for years. She found the last journal, the entries from the final months of his life. His handwriting was shakier, but the clarity of his thought was undiminished. Marcus and Jonathan came to visit today. They did not ask about my health. They asked about my portfolio. They walk through my home and see only price tags. They are my blood, but they are not my kin. They are my father's sons, not mine. And then the final entry dated just 1 week before he passed away. I spoke with Alistair today and finalized the arrangements. It is all going to Emma. Some will call me a fool, a madman. Let them. They think I am leaving her a great burden, a company she cannot possibly run. They are wrong. I am not leaving her a company. I am leaving her a choice. The choice I never had. She can sell it all and live a life of leisure, and I would not blame her. Or she can take the tools I have built, this great engine of capital, and use it as a paintbrush. She can create, she can build, she can protect. She can paint the world in better colors. I have watched her for years. I saw her life with that empty suit of a husband, a man who tried to dim her light so his could shine brighter. I saw him break her heart, but not her spirit. That bird is still on the branch, battered but building. I am not a fool. This is the soundest investment I have ever made. Tears streamed down Emma's face, dripping onto the yellowed page. It wasn't charity. It wasn't a whim. It was a legacy. A torch passed from one artist to another. He hadn't just given her his fortune. He had given her his deferred dream, his vindication. He saw her, the real her, more clearly than anyone ever had. She stood up and walked to the massive window overlooking the stormy sea. The wind howled outside. She finally understood. She was not an imposter. She was the chosen heir. The war with Marcus wasn't just about money anymore. It was about honoring the faith of the man who had seen the steel in her spine long before she knew it was there. She pulled out her phone and called Alistair Finch. "Alistair," she said, her voice clear and strong, echoing in the silent studio. "I know how we're going to win this." The deposition was held in the grand library of Emma's Park Avenue penthouse, her territory. Marcus Pendleton and his aggressive lawyer Harrison Drake sat across a long mahogany table, expecting to face a nervous, intimidated woman. They were not prepared for the calm, steely-eyed leader who entered the room. For hours, Drake hammered at her, trying to portray her as an unqualified, emotionally volatile artist. "Ms. Vance," he sneered, "you worked as a barista. Do you really expect this court to believe you are qualified to oversee a multi-billion-dollar global energy portfolio?" Emma's voice was even. "My job isn't to know how to build a solar farm, Mr. Drake. It's to have the wisdom to listen to the experts who do." Drake shifted to her marriage. "Your ex-husband, Mr. Justin Croft, will testify that you were naive and easily manipulated. Is that an accurate description?" "My ex-husband defines a person's worth by their net worth," she replied coolly. "What he saw as weakness, my great-uncle Arthur saw as strength. It's a matter of perspective." Finally, Drake played what he thought was his trump card. "Why should this court believe your great-uncle would leave his entire life's work to a stranger?" This was the moment. "I wasn't a stranger to him," Emma said, producing authenticated copies of Arthur Pendleton's private journals. She passed them to Drake's team, their faces paling as they read. "My great-uncle," she announced, her voice resonating with authority, "was a brilliant artist forced by his family to abandon his passion. In these journals he documents how he followed my own art career for years. He saw me as a kindred spirit." She locked eyes with Marcus. He also wrote about his nephews. "Allow me to quote his final entry. They walk through my home and see only price tags. They are my blood, but they are not my kin. He didn't leave his fortune to me by mistake, Mr. Drake. He left it to a fellow artist, the only person he trusted to see his life's work not as a balance sheet, but as a blank canvas." The room was silent. She had single-handedly destroyed the foundation of their case. Drake, speechless, mumbled, "No further questions." Justin Croft was brought in next, unaware of what had just transpired. He arrogantly confirmed his sworn statements, painting Emma as a financially naive, emotional wreck. Then Emma's lawyer, Alistair Finch, took over. "Mr. Croft, do you recall a party where you gave a speech referring to Ms. Vance as nothing?" Justin stammered. "It was a poor choice of words." "I am not asking for an apology. Alistair said, his voice turning to ice. "I am establishing a fact. You, their star witness, declared my client to be nothing. Yet you are arguing she is less qualified than a man who was explicitly disinherited for being a greedy vulture. Your testimony is therefore worthless." Justin sat there exposed and humiliated. He had walked in to bury Emma but had only succeeded in burying himself. The deposition shattered their case. Within a week, Marcus Pendleton dropped the lawsuit. The fight was over. Emma was finally free. Her victory solidified her position. The board of Pendleton Global, having witnessed her shrewd and formidable defense of Arthur's legacy, gave her their unequivocal respect. She took the reins of the company not as a corporate raider, but as a visionary. Guided by Arthur's journal, she pivoted the company's focus towards sustainable energy and ethical development, using its immense power to create positive change. Her most personal project was the Arthur Pendleton Foundation for the Arts, which she endowed with $1 billion to support struggling artists, ensuring that others with the creative spirit she and Arthur shared would not have their dreams extinguished by a world that valued only profit. Justin Croft's downfall was swift. The leaked deposition transcripts made him a pariah. His fiancée left him and his firm fired him. A year later, Emma saw him by chance on a street in Midtown. He looked haggard and defeated. "Emma," he said, his voice desperate. "I'm sorry. I was a fool." She looked at the man who had tried to destroy her and felt only a distant pity. "Yes, you were," she replied simply. "Is there any chance?" he began, but she gently cut him off. "The difference between us, Justin, was never about money," she said softly, her voice filled with a final, unshakable peace. "It was about value. I spent years trying to prove my worth to you. Now I know my worth was never in question." She didn't need to say more. He understood. In her silence, he was forced to confront his own emptiness. Emma got into her car without a backward glance. There was nothing for her in the past. Before her was a blank canvas, infinite and bright, and for the first time in her life she held the brush. Emma Vance's story isn't just about inheriting a fortune. It's about inheriting a future she had to learn to deserve. It's a powerful reminder that our true worth is never defined by the people who try to diminish us, but by the strength we find when we're left with nothing but our own character. She went from being publicly shamed to privately powerful, transforming not only her own life, but the lives of countless others. Her journey shows us that the greatest power isn't the money you have, but the good you choose to do with it. What would you do if you were handed a second chance of that magnitude? How would you rewrite your own story? If you were moved by Emma's incredible transformation from heartbreak to heroism, please hit that like button and share this story with someone who needs to be reminded of their own inner strength. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss our next story of unbelievable twists of fate and incredible personal triumphs.